Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello there, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Germany's Chancellor pays tribute after at least 5 people are killed and more than 200 injured in a car-ramming attack at a Christmas market. More than a dozen people are injured in Israel after a Houthi missile from Yemen evades air defences and lands in Tel Aviv. In Gaza, health officials say at least 25 Palestinians have been killed and dozens injured in the latest Israeli strikes across the enclave. And tourists flock to northern China for the first day of Harbin's Ice and Snow Festival. Well, at least 5 people have been killed and more than 200 injured in a car-ramming attack at a Christmas market in Germany. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has visited the scene in the eastern city of Magdeburg, laying flowers for the victims. The suspected driver, who's believed to have acted alone, has been arrested. He's said to be a 50-year-old doctor from Saudi Arabia who's lived in Germany for almost 2 decades. Well, let's go live now to our correspondent, Natalie Carney, who's at the scene in Magdeburg. What is the latest there? We've had the Chancellor visiting, haven't we?
Yes, most certainly. The Chancellor, as well as the Federal Interior Minister, Nancy Fraser, came to this scene earlier today. There were only a few flowers here. And as you can see behind me, there has been a ginormous sharing of prayers and of condolences for the people, not only that were killed in the events of Friday evening, but also that were hurt. As far as the latest numbers are concerned, 5 people lost their lives last night, including a child who we now know is a 9-year-old little boy. The rest were adults. More than 200 people injured. 41 of those are said to be in critical condition. Prosecutors have also come out saying that the man that they have arrested will be charged with 5 murders and grievous bodily harm. As mentioned, yes, the Chancellor was here earlier speaking to reporters on the scene, paying his respects at the site and vowing that authorities will investigate the perpetrator and the events that happened here in depth. He also mentioned that it was very important for us all to stand united and to not allow those who want to divide us to do so. Here's a bit more of what he had to say.
As Federal Chancellor, I would like to assure you of the solidarity of the entire country and all those who bear responsibility in Germany in this matter. This is deeply moving and we will and must stand together here. We won't let those who want to sow hatred get away with it, but that we won't let the perpetrators go unpunished either, and that we will act with all the rigour of the law precisely for the sake of our community and our common future.
The Federal Interior Minister, Nancy Fraser, said that the perpetrator had Islamophobic tendencies. He was said to criticize the German government and had some very right-leaning political thoughts. He was said to be very supportive of the far-right party here in Germany called Alternative for Deutschland. The big questions going forward after all of this is how was this allowed to happen. A similar event took place in the capital, Berlin, back in 2016. At that time, authorities vowed that it would not happen again and security would be stepped up. It has been stepped up, but clearly not enough.
Natalie, many thanks for that. Natalie Carney reporting from Magdeburg in eastern Germany. The US Congress has passed a new funding bill averting a government shutdown. The Senate approved the package in a late-night vote, 40 minutes after the midnight deadline. Without the deal, some public services would have had to close and millions of federal workers would have been without pay. Our correspondent Nick Harper is in Washington for us now. Nick, it's been a really frantic week, hasn't it? Why was it so difficult to reach an agreement?
Yeah, it certainly has been, Paul. A real roller coaster of a week. Really, the complicating factor in all of this has been Elon Musk, the man who's going to be coming in the middle of January to head up a newly created agency that looks at government efficiency. There was a deal earlier this week, a bipartisan agreement that both sides agreed on. They were going to put it to a vote, but then Elon Musk got involved. He said it was a terrible deal. And then we saw Donald Trump get involved, telling Republican lawmakers to vote down that deal. So that deal completely fell apart. And then there was that mad scramble with about 48 hours to go until that deadline, where lawmakers were trying to put together some sort of agreement that all sides could agree on and then vote through. Part of the problem also was that Donald Trump said he wanted to increase the debt ceiling. He wanted that to happen while Joe Biden is still president, because if there was any blowback, it would come on President Biden rather than himself when he comes into office on January the 20th. Now, that wasn't in the final agreement in the end, but it caused a real scramble, a real problem, as we saw lawmakers trying to do something, not just to appease President-elect Donald Trump, but really try and avert that shutdown. Remember, we saw a shutdown 6 years ago, the longest in U.S. history. It lasted 35 days, and it took place under President Trump's watch. The real hope was that we weren't going to see that again, and that late-night vote taking place in both the House and the Senate to avert that crisis.
And Nick, it's just a month now, isn't it, until the new Trump administration comes back in. What sort of funding changes can we expect?
Well, there's a whole load of things that Donald Trump wants to try and achieve, things that he's detailed ahead of his return to the White House. They include trying to extend expiring tax cuts, raising the debt limit, as he tried to do this week, but also cutting federal spending, something Elon Musk will be looking at, but then trying to fund specific areas, including domestic energy production and the big one that was also a vote winner for him in the election, securing the US-Mexico border. We heard from Mike Johnson after the vote. He talked about the months ahead and what we can expect when Donald Trump is back in the Oval Office. Listen to what he had to say.
In January, we will make a sea change in Washington. President Trump will return to D.C. and to the White House, and we will have Republican control of the Senate and the House. Things are going to be very different around here. This was a necessary step to bridge the gap, to put us into that moment where we can put our fingerprints on the final decisions on spending for 2025.
Well, Mike Johnson there, the House Speaker, saying that things will be different, that the Republicans will have more control. But I think it's very interesting to note that what we did see unfold amid all of this chaos this week is a whole number of Republicans who were willing to defy President-elect Donald Trump and stand against him and not achieve a deal that would have done the one thing that he wanted, raising the debt limit. And all of this chaos, although it has been averted, bear in mind that they're going to have to do it all again. What was agreed was just a temporary stopgap measure. It means that the government is funded through to March the 14th. At that point, there will be another deadline and another opportunity where lawmakers need to achieve some sort of deal to ensure that the lights stay on in Washington.
Nick, thanks so much for that. Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. Airports have reopened following a Ukrainian drone attack on the Russian city of Kazan. Moscow's defense ministry says the city, located 500 miles east of Moscow, faced 3 waves of drone strikes early on Saturday. Meanwhile, Kiev's Air Force says Russia attacked Ukraine with more than 100 drones overnight. It downed 57 of them, while 56 others failed to reach their targets. Our correspondent Alex Cadier reports from Kiev.
The sources in Russia, including the state-controlled TASS news agency, saying that an industrial plant was targeted in this strike, but that the drones missed and hit a residential building instead. 8 drones in total. The Russian authorities saying that 3 were shot down and 3 were diverted by countermeasures, Russian countermeasures. So it hit a residential complex in the city of Kazan, 800 kilometers east of Moscow, 1,000 kilometers from the front lines here in Ukraine, but no casualties reported according to local authorities as things stand. Ukraine not officially taking responsibility for this, as is customary when it comes to these kinds of strikes. So certainly this attack by Ukraine, we know the Ukrainians have been increasing the attacks deep into Russian territory, targeting logistical supply lines and industrial hubs to weaken Russia's ability to conduct this war. 8 drones, 3 shot down, 3 diverted. This in comparison, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, to the 113 Shahed, Iranian-made Shahed drones fired at Ukraine overnight last night. 57, as you said, shot down, 56 diverted, either with countermeasures or just failing to reach their target. So certainly this kind of air warfare really continuing at scale, and we know that from Ukrainian authorities that those strikes deep into Russian territory with Ukrainian-made drones will continue.
And are there any significant shifts, Alex, in public sentiment towards ongoing war efforts or negotiations?
Well, certainly from the Ukrainian perspective, President Zelensky saying that there can be no ceasefire discussion without security guarantees from Ukraine's allies. We don't know exactly what that would look like. Some have floated the idea of European peacekeepers in a buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine. Not clear yet, but what President Zelensky has said is that EU guarantees, European security guarantees and European support is not enough without the United States also offering its backing. We know that President-elect Trump wants to have a ceasefire deal very, very quickly, and that will be a big part of the pressure on Ukraine. Speaking to Ukrainians, they certainly are tired and exhausted going into nearly 3 years of Russia's war here, and they would consider some kind of ceasefire. It used to be very taboo to discuss negotiations. Victory was the only objective, but now people are certainly more open to it. But they don't want to compromise and give away too much of Ukrainian sovereign territory. So certainly those discussions will rumble on. We know from Vladimir Putin, from the Russian side, he is open to meeting President-elect Trump. So we'll have to monitor in the next few days, the next few weeks, as Christmas approaches, whether or not a truce is possible. One proposed truce was from Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, seen here as being very, very close to the Kremlin, proposing some kind of Christmas truce. The Ukrainians saying that that's just not viable because Viktor Orban is not a neutral negotiator in this conflict and therefore cannot be trusted to have these ceasefire negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. So on the ground, this war is grinding, it is exhausting. The Ukrainians are tired, but certainly not willing to compromise more than they need to.
Alex Cadier in Kiev there. Let's get some reaction now from Russia, and our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova reports from Moscow.
We have seen the shocking pictures of the attacks against the Russian city of Kazan, which has just recently hosted the BRICS summit. And we have seen that there have been several residential buildings that have been targeted by those drones that Moscow says have been sent by the Ukrainian side. So according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, there have been 6 drones that have been intercepted by the Russian air defense systems. And they were, according to Moscow, indeed targeting those civilian objects. We have seen the inflammation taking place in 3 districts in Sovietsky, Kirovsky and Privolzhsky district of the city of Kazan. And the authorities have started the mass evacuations of the residents from those areas. These evacuations have been ongoing throughout early hours of Saturday, and there have been temporary shelters set up for the residents in the city of Kazan. There have also been the orders to cancel all mass events in the city for the next couple of days. And there has been the emergency situation declared for the workers of this city who are involved into the liquidation of the aftermath of those attacks. However, we understand from the local authorities, luckily there have been no wounded, no dead as a result of those strikes by the Ukrainian side. The Russian Foreign Minister spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has issued a statement saying that the silence on behalf of the Western communities only saying that they tacitly support these sort of actions and has demanded some sort of condemnation from the West with regards to these tactics. She also has stressed that the very fact that the city of Kazan, which was actually targeted for the first time, has been targeted by Ukraine, only shows how successful the holding of the BRICS summit in October in Russia has been.
And President Putin has said that Russia is ready to compromise with Donald Trump on the Ukraine war. How's that being received there with the public?
Well, certainly there is some hope when you talk to the Russian people that with the arrival of Donald Trump administration, there could be some change when it comes to the policy on Russia. But Russians already know Donald Trump as the U.S. president. They already have seen the launch of large-scale sanctions being held exactly during his first term in office. So there are very little expectations when it comes to the ending of this conflict. I think it does seem that most Russians understand that we are in it for the long haul. However, the hope is obviously there, but the Russian authorities have long been saying that they don't want to exaggerate and to make any sort of hopes or expectations on Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the operation is ongoing, and the Russian authorities insist that the Russian military-industrial complex, that the Russian defense sector have been receiving additional funds from the state budget, and that only means that Russia is counting on the military means when it comes to ending this conflict and achieving Russian goals that have been outlined by the Russian president back in 2022.
Dasha Chernysheva in Moscow. Demonstrators supporting and opposing South Korea's impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol, have rallied in Seoul. Yoon's presidential powers are suspended, but he remains in office. Authorities are investigating whether the short-lived martial law that he declared on December the 3rd constituted insurrection. The Constitutional Court will hold its first hearing on December the 27th to decide Yoon's fate. French President Emmanuel Macron says that France's military base in Djibouti could play a larger role amid shifting dynamics in Africa. Macron met with his counterpart Ismail Omar Guelleh and celebrated Christmas with French forces stationed in the country. Djibouti, which hosts 1,500 French soldiers, remains France's largest military base abroad and is a key part of its Indo-Pacific strategy. This is CGTN, still ahead. A Houthi missile evades Israel's air defense system, leaving at least 14 people injured. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes across Gaza kill at least 25 Palestinians in the last 24 hours.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Our top story. At least 5 people are killed and more than 200 injured in a car ramming attack at a Christmas market in Germany. In Israel, at least 16 people have been injured after a missile from Yemen hit the Tel Aviv area. Israel's military says its air defense systems failed to intercept the missile. Yemen's Houthis have claimed responsibility. The attack comes after Israel launched multiple airstrikes earlier this week, including on the Yemeni capital Sana'a, which killed at least 9 people. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv.
The second time in the space of 48 hours in which the Houthis not only launch a missile towards Israel, but the missile actually makes impact, bypassing the very sophisticated Israeli missile defense system, meaning there's some way to go past it. This time it landed in a playground in between buildings, and that is why we're speaking only of material damage and light injuries and not of something more severe, which would have happened had this missile hit on the top of a building, and it comes 48 hours after a previous incident in which another missile also launched at this very early morning in the hour in the morning, eventually hit an empty school. So this is a concerning issue. Why did this happen? Perhaps because the Houthis, with the help of Iran, have been able to manufacture a missile in which the warhead actually separates itself from the missile, and therefore the missile may be intercepted, but not the warhead, which lands and causes major damage. This is something that may have happened. Whatever the case is, this is clearly concerning for Israel. And as you mentioned, after the previous attack early Thursday morning, there was a massive Israeli strike on Yemen, and the Houthi leaders said back then that even after those attacks, they will not be intimidated and continue firing towards Israel. And they lived to that promise. Early this morning at roughly 3:30 a.m., millions of Israelis rushed to the shelters because a missile that's about to hit central Israel is impacting the entire Tel Aviv area, which is the most populated in this country, meaning millions and millions of people run to shelter, and the missile was actually able to land, cause damage, cause injuries, a major concern for Israel, as it seems that the Houthis found a breach in this missile defense system.
That was Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Well, at least 25 Gazans have been killed and more than 60 others injured in Israeli strikes across the enclave over the past 24 hours. Health officials say 12 members of the same family, including 7 children, are among those killed in a strike on a residential building in Jabalia. Our correspondent Rami Al-Magari is in Khan Yunis.
The latest Israeli airstrike was on the Charter refugee camp in western Gaza City, in which 7 people have been reportedly killed in this particular strike that is latest in the Gaza Strip. Yes, as you mentioned, there was a strike on the Jabalia town in which 12 people were killed from the same family. 7 or 8 of them were children. That's what has been reported. This goes alongside with more Israeli army destruction of homes in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli army actions continue unabated around the hospitals, especially the Kamal Adwan hospital that has been rendered unfunctioning or defunctioning for the past several weeks. More Israeli actions were reported around the Al-Auda hospital. 2 people were killed. Also in the Gaza City, there was another strike around a shelter school in which 2 people were killed. In the central Gaza Strip, Nusayrat refugee camp, there was a strike that hit a residential building in Nusayrat refugee camp in which 15 people or 7 people were killed and several others were injured. In the Rafah town in south of the Gaza Strip, there were some sort of Israeli actions, including the destruction of a neighborhood in Rafah town, and more destruction is taking place around the Rafah town, the neighborhoods over there, as many of the neighborhoods have been flattened since the past over the past several months. The situation also, local media outlets report or suggest that there were intensive clashes between militants, Gaza militants, mainly Hamas, and Israeli soldiers, mainly in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. To the east of Gaza Strip, mainly the central Gaza Strip refugee camp of Al-Buraj, where there there was some kind of intensive shelling to the east of the refugee camp. And these developments, by the way, come against the backdrop of continued talks, mediated talks between Israel and Hamas. And Hamas leadership statement said that the parties are close to finalizing a deal on ceasefire unless Israel, the Israeli party, demands something more. This comes also amidst Israeli Prime Minister's statements that the war against Hamas will continue unabated unless Hamas is removed.
Rami Al-Maghari in Khan Yunis. The United States has scrapped a $10 million reward for the arrest of Syria's de facto new ruler, Ahmed al-Sharaa. It follows what senior US diplomats called very productive talks with leaders of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that ousted the Assad government. Washington had designated HTS as a terrorist organization 6 years ago, but the head of the US delegation said that it decided to remove that bounty after receiving what it called positive messages during their first meeting. Now, tourists have been flocking to the northern Chinese city of Harbin for the annual Snow and Ice Festival. Despite sub-zero temperatures, opening day tickets sold out, with thousands of people eager to enjoy the enchanting ice carvings. Our correspondent Wang Xiying reports.
Spanning an area of 1 million square meters, equivalent to 140 football fields, this year's Harbin Ice and Snow World opened its frosty gates on Saturday, drawing visitors from all over the country.
It's my first time ever traveling to Harbin. I've been longing to visit the Ice and Snow World. I could stay here for the whole day.
My whole family is here. It's so impressive to see such magnificent ice sculptures in person.
We are so happy to be here. Everything is perfect. The scenery, the facilities. This is the kind of joy we just can't experience in the south.
The outdoor temperature right now is about minus 15 degrees. It's super freezing, but people's enthusiasm has already ignited this entire place, as there's so much more to be expected this year.
The park has elevated the fun by expanding its star attraction, the Super Ice Slide, to 24 exhilarating lanes. Additionally, over 20 smaller ice slides ensure that visitors of all ages can fully immerse themselves.
This year features the largest number of landscapes in our history, with many new attractions added, making it a must-visit experience for tourists.
With the theme Dream of Winter, Love Among Asia, the Wonderland integrates many elements from the upcoming 2025 Asian Winter Games, setting a new pace for Harbin to shine on a bigger international stage.
To make it easier for foreign visitors, we've installed bilingual and multilingual guides throughout the park, along with machines that allow guests to purchase tickets using their passports. We want to showcase the warmth and hospitality that Harbin is known for.
By day, Ice and Snow World is crystal clear, but just a few hours later, the neon-lit ice sculptures reveal a completely different, dazzling scene of wonder. Wang Xiying, CGTN, Harbin, Heilongjiang Province.
Very beautiful. Well, finally, people living in the Northern Hemisphere have been marking the shortest day of the year. In Egypt, visitors woke up at dawn to watch the sunrise line up with the axis of an ancient temple. It's an event that only happens on the winter solstice. Meanwhile, here in the UK, people gathered at the ancient site of Stonehenge, where the stones are positioned to line up with the sun's movements. And a last look at the headlines. Germany's Chancellor pays tribute after at least 5 people are killed and more than 200 injured in a car ramming attack at a Christmas market. More than a dozen people are injured in Israel after a Houthi missile from Yemen evades air defences and lands in Tel Aviv. And in Gaza, health officials say at least 25 Palestinians have been killed and dozens injured in the latest Israeli strikes across the enclave. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. There's more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's The Agenda with Juliet Mann. For now, though, from all the team in London, goodbye.